Hello and welcome to Webhack Wednesday. I'm Martin Beebe.
And I'm Martin Kern.
And today we're going to be talking about JavaScript futures, the things that are happening in the language, the ES 2015 JavaScript specification.
Okay.
So new
Sounds
stuff
exciting already.
Yeah.
we were like 3 words into the show. We're already talking about specifications and standards.
Yeah, it's not a great way to start. But we were talking in our production meeting about what we could demo, how we could demo some of this.
Yeah.
And I put together a demoable demo. But it was based upon some data. And I said to you, what data should be in here? Like, what real-world data could we use?
Well, one of our friends, a lady called Rachel Peck, she used to work for us here in the UK, and she's recently emigrated to Australia.
Yeah.
She's our biggest fan. And there she is. Look, we've got a live feed from Australia here featuring Rachel. Now, Rachel
she just lives on the top of the Sydney Opera House.
That's why she lives. She just floats
in from the sky. Right.
And she's been on about. She's wanted us to feature Sydney in the show for some time now.
Right. So this is the perfect opportunity.
Almost since day one, and she's been quite.
Well, if you're thinking, and we said if you think about Australia, really for a Brit, the only thing that comes to mind is
cricket.
Well, the Ashes.
Yeah, well, after Rachel, and then Sydney, and then a few other things, and eventually cricket, and then the Ashes, which is a thing to do with cricket.
Yeah. Big sports fans, me and Martin.
Yeah.
But, we got
let's just say goodbye to Rachel.
Bye, Rachel.
Bye, Rach, yeah. There she goes. Bless. So we're talking cricket, and we're talking Ashes, which is a cricket tournament that happens between England and Australia.
Yeah. So what I would want to do...
And also it's been going on since the dawn of time as well, so there's a lot of data there.
Yeah, although we're not going to look at most of the data, because we went on to Wikipedia and looked at all of the historical win-losses records for Australia and England, and shows that it's probably best if we just choose the latest 5 results.
Yeah, it's from 2005 seems like a good time to start.
Because prior to that, Australia seems to dominate, but we're just going to exclude that data to prove not to prove a point, but this is the data. This is the wonderful website that I've built. Look at this, a magical use of...
I've never seen such a beautiful table.
Look, the idea is I'm switching between England and Australia, and it shows the different wins for those things. For those teams, and then it will sum it up at the bottom, but we'll get to why that's not working later when I look at the actual code. Yeah. It should be working, but it's not, but don't worry. So the most common sort of things that we talk about when looking at the new version of JavaScript is classes.
Okay.
So the way that I built that little wonderful table thing was I used a little knockout framework. And knockout is it's basically an MVVM pattern so that we can abstract or we can separate our view from our JavaScript. And the way that what you do in a knockout app generally is you create a thing called a view model. Yeah. And that basically contains all of the data that the view is going to use. Okay. Now this is what in regular JavaScript, what this view model might look like.
Right, okay.
So we have a little variable called @viewModel, and it creates an anonymous function. And then that anonymous function sets up properties, has some functions on it. And then we say knockout.applyBindings, and we create a new one of these @viewModels. Okay. Now this is fine, but this is a perfect example where the syntax doesn't, for me at least, really represent creating a class. Yeah. But it looks a bit like a class. Yeah. So wouldn't it be better if we could create a class? Well, in ECMA 2015, we can. So now this is an identical replication of what was below here. Yeah. But it's prettied up a little bit. Yeah, sure. One of the things that you'll also notice, there's a few different things that I've used here to kind of prettify it. This particular syntax, which is this equal arrow, it's called fat arrows or a lambda. Sometimes it's called. It's in C# you'd call that a lambda. And that lambda really it's equivalent to this code, which is function, like an anonymous function, which returns. Okay. So that is the same sort of syntax. That replaces, this thing here replaces that syntax. Okay. So I think to get that exact same stuff here, we would just do, I want to do equals, that would be the same, they're equivalents to each other, excuse me. I wasn't meant to try that, I was meant to put a space in there. Okay, cool. So they're like syntactical equivalents, those two things. Now it doesn't mean that, so you could use either one that you wanted to, but you'll find that this is I think it's a much neater syntax.
It is, yeah.
It certainly look at the number of lines of code and stuff in the bottom example versus the top. It just neatens things up, these lambdas. The other thing it does is in JavaScript, you have this concept of this, which means like in C#, if you're writing a class, this references the class that it's in, right?
Yeah.
So this dot and then the property name.
Yeah.
Now it's similar in JavaScript. So this dot chosen team is going to be the property of that JavaScript object. But this can change depending on how the function's invoked, which can be quite confusing. So you end up, especially when you have lots of anonymous nested functions, like here we've got this refresh data function, and it's got a little function object in there. What you end up doing a lot is you start creating copies of this object and passing it into other functions, because those functions can't just call this and it'd be the same this which invoked the function.
That instead.
Yeah, it's that instead of this.
Yeah. Or that this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The cool thing about these this new lambda expression is that this is always this.
Okay.
So you can always just use the word this rather than having to make copies of this. And it's a very common sort of problem in JavaScript that people come up against. So I'm going to just delete the old JavaScript there and just leave ourselves with this new app view model. Exactly the same way.
Cool.
Now I'm running this in Edge, Microsoft Edge. Microsoft Edge understands this syntax, and Chrome understands the syntax, and Firefox latest versions understand the syntax. But obviously, if I was running this in IE11, this would just balk because it doesn't understand.
So that's an important consideration to make then. Make sure that if you're using this stuff, you know what browser support is out there. And
sure. Now I'm just using this like in a JavaScript file, and some browsers know what this stuff means.
Yeah.
For browsers that don't know what this means, if you need to target them, which you probably do if you're building websites, and you want to use this new syntax, you would use a thing called a transpiler.
Okay.
Like Babel.js, or there's TypeScript is a transpiler as well, which basically takes this new syntax and then compiles it down to old versions of JavaScript.
Okay, cool.
Most of this is just syntax, so it can easily be transpiled or converted into older JavaScript. So you would just run this through a process if you wanted to do that. So another feature that's been added to JavaScript is the idea of consts. So in other languages, you might want to have a constant variable which doesn't change, or something which shouldn't change. So maybe this backend wins, for example, I might want to be a const.
Yeah, like typically like an API endpoint is the sort of thing you might put in there.
Yeah, exactly. So const would be lock, like it's just like basically a repair, an alternative name for that. But what the difference being is that lock can now not be changed.
Yeah.
So if I said lock equals something else, now ordinarily my editor will red underline here.
Yeah.
For some reason it's not doing that today.
Okay, that's a bit annoying.
Yeah, I know. But
you're missing a semicolon, is that it?
Semicolon doesn't know. No. It doesn't matter too much. But you would ordinarily get a red underline. That's the thing. You can tell you're not doing that much JavaScript because you'll know that semicolons in JavaScript are there.
But we're in next level JavaScript now, though, so I wondered whether it's something that...
No, it's not that important. It's not like C# where you have to have semicolons. JavaScript. But anyway, lock is... I can't change this constant. Now, I should see that in my editor. I don't know why it's not happening, but I am now failing. My application's failing because if I go to the dev tools and look inside the console, we'll say assignment to const.
Okay.
Can't assign
do
to
that,
const.
not allowed.
Obviously, this would be usually picked up on your build process or inside of your editor.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want this actually going to production as a problem, but it does stop this issue of people trying to change a constant variable.
Okay, cool.
Weirdly enough, though, nothing's stopping them changing a const to a var, and it'll be fine.
Yeah.
They're going to change as they want. Okay, but now let's say we've got so we've looked at const and seen what those things can do. Let's have a look at next thing. This string concatenation.
Okay.
Because this is a problem in lots of languages, and there's lots of different ways of solving this problem in different languages. JavaScript has a new way of solving this. So I've got a variable called team, and I want to concatenate this to this string and this string.
Okay.
So instead of this syntax, what I can do is if I put at the front of this what we call a backtick instead of a speech mark.
Okay.
So on Windows machines, this is just underneath the escape key.
So this is the same character that you use for if you're doing Markdown, if you want to put code in the Markdown file.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think on a
I never knew that was called a backtick.
Yeah, on a Mac keyboard, I think it's somewhere down near the control keyboard.
Okay.
It's just above the control key.
Yep.
But it's called a backtick, yeah.
Okay, cool.
So now I've got a backtick. Instead of doing this sort of breaking out of a string and then concatenating, what I'll do is I'll use a new syntax, put a dollar symbol, and then one of those. I don't know what they're called.
It's a curly bracket, isn't it?
Curly bracket, is that what you want to
We'll
call
call it that.
I prefer to call it to a on its side mustache.
Yeah, I think more conventionally it's a curly bracket. But
Okay.
if
you want to be conventional, Martin.
if you're seeing a moustache in there, then that's what we'll call it, if that's going to make you happier.
So that's the same sort of syntax, but all it's going to do now is it's concatenating that string, and we've got the team variable going in there, and you've got this new sort of syntax where you don't have to have all these adds. Makes it a little bit easier,
Yeah.
especially if you've got lots of text, makes it easier to read.
So C# developers, that'll feel quite familiar to C# developers.
It's similar to the C#. It's
Yeah.
slightly different to the C# syntax
Yeah.
for template strings, but it's similar.
Yeah,
It's really
curly
similar.
brackets are
You
definitely
don't use
involved.
you don't use backticks.
Or sideways moustaches.
Sideways
Yeah.
moustaches.
Yeah.
And the other thing in JavaScript to note that when I'm using these backticks, that string can go across multiple lines now.
Right.
So
That's
this
cool.
would all be one multiple line, which again, that can be quite useful, especially if you've got just for a readability point of view.
Yeah.
But then also, if you actually do want carriage line return feeds into text in JavaScript, then this is a really simple way of doing carriage line return feeds.
Cool.
So let's just go back to that. Put a backtick there, and delete that. Oop, there we go.
Okay.
So that's template strings, it's called. Now, talking of new variables, so we've had const as a variable. There's another one which you'll see a lot people using in the next version of JavaScript called let.
A lot of let.
There's a lot
Sorry,
of let.
I've got to stop doing that.
That's right.
Silly jokes that aren't funny.
So
even to me, they're not funny. I don't know why I say them.
So we've got let. I'm just replacing the word var with let. And what let does is it's a way of declaring a variable, but only in the current block.
Okay.
So in JavaScript, these little sideways moustaches, they represent a block of code, right?
Yeah.
And then we've got a block which is nested, and there's a block inside which is nested inside of that other block.
Yeah.
A variable, which is declared up the top here, that is going to be available in all of those blocks.
Right.
Whereas a let is only available in the current block that it's created in. Now, in the instance of a for loop, when I create an I enumerable, the I enumerable here, and I declare it with a let, that's only going to be available within this block, the result.
Sure.
Sum.
Okay.
Now, I'm going to save it in a variable called I, this integer, which is going to be incremented every one time, right? So what I can do is if I put an alert in here and declare I, say it says minus 32,
Right. Which is
what we declared.
Clearly not the amount of wins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's or the increment, or not even the time. So this should be about 5, I think.
Yeah.
Now, if I change that to var, there, save that, it would say 7.
7. Okay.
There's 7 pieces of data in my array.
Yeah.
And that's how many times it's looped through it. But because I've put it as let, I is only that I is only declared in this scope, and that I remains untouched.
I get it.
So, that's terrible.
Yeah,
as
I know.
well. It's a
Sorry,
terrible joke.
I'm actually turning into my dad. So slowly, it's
I
happening.
get it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so this for syntax is pretty ugly.
Yep.
But most languages have a more succinct way of looping over an array. So if I do a for loop like this and say for, and I'll use that let again, or I could use a variable if I want, item. If I put in JSON like this, now you might expect that to work. And I think if you came from a C# background, for in loop, you'd expect it to loop over the arrays of that object.
Yeah.
In JavaScript, sadly, for in doesn't loop over the values of an array.
Yeah.
It loops over the properties.
Okay.
So if we had JSON here, for example, and I had a property called .ted equals 45, and then JSON maybe had some other numbers, like maybe 5, like an array which had 6 items, it would say, and I just console logged JSON or item out here, I wouldn't get what I expected, which is all the values of the JSON array, I would get 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then TED.
Right.
Because it's all the properties of the array, which are the indexes, and then the actual property called TED. It's pretty useless, actually, as a for in loop. So what I can do in JavaScript now is put for of, and that is what I would expect a for in loop to do, which it loops through all of the...
Of course, they can't change in, because that might be used.
It does something. It's useful, actually, being able to loop over the properties
Even
of
though you
an
just
object.
said it's pretty useless.
It's useless for the point of view that I would want to use it for, but it's
to other people, it might be useful.
There are uses. There are uses for it in JavaScript.
Okay, I'll believe you on that one.
But they can't change it. They can't go back and change that, so they've had to add a new name for it. So it's a for of loop.
Okay.
So now, rather than saying I've no longer got an I variable, I've just got this thing called item. So now it's just item.wins rather than a for loop.
And that's a lot nicer, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah, it looks nicer to me. It's a lot more succinct as a thing. There we go, and then the total wins.
Okay, great. And just to compare, like England versus Australia on that, just whilst we're there.
Oh, now we've got the real results.
Yeah.
Australia have won 15, England have won 13.
But I think overall England have won more of the series.
Yes.
Yeah, because there's been more draws and stuff.
Yeah, they have.
Probably should have thought that through a little bit more into the data.
Yeah, because what we've managed to do is when we're trying to ridicule Australia, what we've managed to do is ridicule England. Because they've actually won more individuals.
Cricket's the winner. That's what we can conclude there.
Cricket's the winner. Yeah, exactly. So let's just look at the last thing that I do on this page, which is I get the number and then I put total wins, 13. Well, again, I'm doing a bit of string concatenation there. I've got this total wins field, and I've got the number 13. Now, it originally was sales data, this stuff that I was working with.
Okay.
And so I actually needed decimal places.
Right.
Now, I don't really need decimal places anymore, but if I were to add them, if I pass this over as a decimal place, 5, oops, and then go back to my page, you'll see now I have 5 decimal places of 30 of solid integers, which is not really helpful, but just stick with me for the purposes of this. And basically, so this format sums function takes a string saying total wins, and the number of decimal places, and then a sum.
Okay.
And then this is the format sum function, and it's got the start text, decimal places, and the sum. And all I do is take the decimal places, number of decimal places, and I pass the float and to a fixed with that number of decimal places.
Okay,
so
cool.
that's what does the formatting for me. So this has got this thingy formatting. Now I'm passing it over here like this. But what if, for some reason in an application, you were going to potentially pass over undefined parameters, or not pass over parameters at all, like leave them off the end. So I'm just going to add an undefined variable here. And what I'm going to do is use a new feature inside of JavaScript, which is default parameters.
Okay.
Again, something which you'll have seen in other languages before, but it's new to JavaScript. So we can say, default parameter, I want 2 decimal places if nothing's passed in.
Yeah.
So now, when we go to this, we should see, even though I'm not passing in something, it's defaulting to 2 decimal places. So we've got default parameters. And if I set that back to 4, it will go to 4 rather than that because it's no longer undefined.
Yeah.
Now, I might want to say, I don't want this total wins and this 4 to just be passed in. I want to set that in a configuration file somewhere.
Okay.
So I have an imaginary configuration.
An imaginary one?
Imaginary one here. So I'm saying 5 decimal things, and the name that I want to use is sum wins. Now, this is a JavaScript array, or an array of values. So I've got an array of values in this config thing, and I've got a function which takes an array of parameters, I guess. I know that my array's got 2 things in it, so I want to spread that array out across these 2 parameters. So the way I do that is use the spread. So I just call config there, and I say ... like that.
Okay.
And that spreads out the parameter or the object, so that it now becomes the first and second parameter. So it should now change to sum wins, and then the decimal places should be number 5. But you've got the idea that I've got sum wins, and then the decimal places, 5 decimal places. So that's spread out an array to pass in. let's say I want to not just pass over the sum, but also want to pass over other numbers. Don't know why I'd want to add all of these numbers.
Well, it's imaginary, so it's fine.
What I can do is I can take all of those as named parameters,
Yeah.
and then just say everything else which comes over, I'm going to save it in a variable called extra.
Oh, cool.
But ... that extra, and it will capture all of the other parameters. Because if I had just left it as extra, it would have only just captured that parameter.
Yeah.
But now it's going to capture all of the parameters after that point.
Okay.
And it's going to capture them into an array called extra. So now I can use that loop which we're doing for let item of extra. And then I can say sum equals sum plus item. We now have this massive number which is added from all the additional ones.
Okay, that's good.
So that's, and we call that a rest parameter, which is taking sort of, doing the inverse of what spread did, basically.
Yeah.
So there's the ones that I wanted to show you.
Okay.
The very basics of the next version of JavaScript.
That's cool, some good stuff in there.
Yeah. So that's it for another week of Webpack Wednesday. We'll see you next Wednesday for another web topic.